What's going on, everyone? Happy Sunday. It's a late Sunday night, about 8:30 right now at the time of beginning this live stream. But welcome in to another edition of GC Live Sunday Reset Late Night Edition with your host, yours truly, Jack Veltri. Appreciate you guys tuning in. As always, we've got a lot to talk about this evening as it's been a busy day in Gamecock athletics as women's basketball is moving on to the Final Four. Softball, can't forget about softball around here. Softball picks up a huge series win on the road this weekend. And then, last but not least, baseball. We will get into it. Believe me, we will get into all of this. So appreciate you guys joining as always. If you're not already, be sure to subscribe to Gamecock Central's YouTube page, Gamecock Central on YouTube, as well as follow us on all of our social media at Gamecock Central. And as always, as well, if you're not already, subscribe to GamecockCentral.com for all coverage and updates and so much more on our website. Perfect time of year to do so as women's basketball will be embarking on the Final Four here relatively soon. And then, after that, baseball season moves on and softball, we have softball coverage on there too. And of course, football and men's basketball transfer portal. So much going on. I don't know why you wouldn't be subscribed, quite honestly. That's like that, I don't know. I don't know, So anyway, enough of that. Let's get into it. But first, got to talk to you guys real quick about our main show sponsor right above me here if you're listening. But if you're watching or, you're listening later on, wherever you get your podcast from, but you can't see it right now, I'm talking about Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans. If you're in the market to buy a home, but you have no idea where to begin, or maybe you need help with your mortgage, don't know where to start, got good news for you. Clint is your guy to get in contact with. He's been in the mortgage industry for such a long time now. He's a lifelong Gamecock fan. He's also a longtime supporter of Gamecock Central and all of our GC Live programs. You'll always see his information right above me here on screen. So just in case, though, if you want to give him a call, 803-422-6797. The NMLS number for him is 71597, or you can go to ClintHammond.com for more info. And like I said, he'll help you out through the process, take you through it step by step, and get you on track to buying your potential dream home wherever you desire. All right. We got to get into a lot of topics tonight. And yes, Jeff 2001 says, Jack talking Gamecock sports after dark. Yes. Busy day. Wanted to wait a little bit longer after, baseball ended relatively early for me today, around 4:30, but wanted to wait a little bit for everything to kind of cool down a little bit. Women's basketball was still going on. You obviously had softball playing a huge doubleheader today. And that's where we're going to start real quick before we dive into everything else. Huge weekend for the Gamecock softball team. They were at LSU this weekend, number 3 LSU, top 15 matchup, really huge series out in Baton Rouge this weekend. And South Carolina lost game 1 of this series and then had a doubleheader today. And as we all know, it's very hard to sweep a doubleheader, let alone on the road. And that's what South Carolina did, right? I think after that series against Oklahoma a few weeks ago where you had to go to Norman, long flight out there, and you lose very, very close ball games, getting swept. I mean, that's a series that I think a lot of people look back on with a little bit of like the rose-colored tinted glasses and are like, all right, it's South Carolina number 1. This program hasn't really been at the top of softball for, honestly, like ever, really. And coming off some bad years, new coach, you go in there, you play as well as you did, and you come up this close, 3 one-run losses to maybe even sweeping, maybe winning a game, heck, winning a series, and you come up just short. It's okay because you bounce back with series wins over. I know you lost a midweek game to Coastal Carolina, but you bounced back with series wins over Georgia and Texas Tech to get yourself right back on the horse. And then you go out here this weekend, and I think you cleared that. There's still hurdles to clear, obviously, But I think winning a series on the road, let alone against a top team in the country, shows that you are like, all right, you're for real. As if you weren't already. It's pretty safe to say this team is like legitimately very, very good. And let's also not forget that's a huge midweek win over Clemson earlier this week in softball, a shutout win. So a huge series out in Baton Rouge, and Nick Babb brings up a great point. Softball better than baseball. Who would have ever thought? Me personally, not me, because you look at where these programs were at a season ago. I mean, both of them made the postseason, but I think you can argue softball had the tougher road to climb just because, again, they've made the postseason the last 2 years, but go back to 3-4 years ago. This was a program that under Bev Smith was worst in the SEC by a wide margin, the bottom of the basement in a loaded SEC. Add Oklahoma and Texas to the mix, and they're good at baseball too. But in softball, these are two of the top teams in the country. So very tough for Ashley Chastain Woodard and her team with all the additions they made. It was definitely going to be a tough uphill battle to get to where they are. I mean, I think the consensus always was, all right, you'll do good in non-conference play, and then you get to conference play, and it'll be tough, right? That's always how it goes for South Carolina in softball, I would say, especially over the last few years. But give this program a lot of credit. She's done a fantastic job, and Jeff brings up a great point. You can make the argument that SEC softball is the toughest SEC sport. Every conference schedule, regardless of sport, is going to be tough in this league. But I think this is especially true for softball, right? I think softball has it really tough, and they've done a great job navigating it so far, I would say. Like, yes, they got swept by Oklahoma, but that's also a team that is, defending champs, and they've been the queens of college softball for years now, right? So, and you're on the road. You lost 3 one-run loss games. That is what it is, right? But this weekend really made a big statement, as if a lot of other statements haven't already been made this year. And most importantly, for a lot of Gamecock fans out there, from what I heard, was a very good crowd beating Clemson and shutting them out. So that is huge week for softball there. And I do think they're at this point, like I know they're 11 right now. I do think at some point you probably got to bump them like into the top 5. I just think they are, like they've had, I think right now, besides Oklahoma, maybe besides Texas, I think they're like one of the top teams in the country for sure. And what we've seen from them this weekend definitely justifies that with some really gritty wins right there. So huge weekend for the ladies out in Baton Rouge. So, that's really exciting to see, obviously. All right. Women's basketball now. Next topic of discussion. Final Four bound for the 5th season in a row. It's just been constant consistency. And I got a comment on here somewhere. Big Red asking, is it odd to see the women's basketball team struggling at times? I think it's a little bit jarring because you look at them and they've been the Goliath of this sport for a few years now, I would say. Obviously UConn has been super good. You had the one year where LSU won recently, but like South Carolina has been just consistently great and coming off a national championship. There have been some times this season where they have struggled. Yes, losing to UCLA, losing to UConn at home, and losing to Texas, and then winning the SEC tournament. I think turned up the notch a little bit to get themselves right going into the NCAA tournament. And then going into Birmingham, you've had honestly the last 3 games have been relatively close, going back to the round of 32 against Indiana. But give this team credit. They just know how to win in tight spots. And that's what we've seen this weekend, honestly. So in Birmingham, South Carolina beat Maryland in the Sweet 16 the other night. And then today took down Duke in a 54-50 win. in the Elite Eight to move on to, like I said, the 5th straight Final Four under Dawn Staley here at South Carolina over the last 5 years. And a very tight-knit game, I will say. Starts out a little bit quick. South Carolina takes I believe, a 4-point lead into the half. And then Duke is going up. They're up going into the fourth quarter. And you look at the numbers. I mean, there's a good reason why Duke was able to get back ahead in this game after trailing. The Blue Devils shot 7 of 13 from the floor in that third period, 53.85%. Very good number. And they went 3 of 5 from three-point range, too. And that gave them a chance to make South Carolina sweat, I would say, definitely a good bit, especially after Maryland gave them a good scare just 2 days earlier. But in that fourth quarter is where the money was made in this game. Carolina went 5 of 11 from the field. Didn't take a single three-point attempt, but again, that's not really their style. They're definitely, anyway. So 45% from the field in that fourth period to finish 43% on the day. And as for Duke, kind of a big drop-off in that fourth quarter. And that give a lot of credit to South Carolina's defense there. Because like I said before, they made a trio of three-pointers in the third period. But then that fourth period, 0 for 4 from deep, and then 4 of 16 from the field. So on a day where South Carolina shoots well over 40%, and outside the third period, really a struggle for Duke as they finished shooting 19 of 60 from the floor and 31% from the field. So I think that is really where the difference was made in this game. And again, 5th straight Final Four in the last 5 years. Really impressive for South Carolina there. And the all-regional team came out. Toby Fournier from Duke, Ashlyn Jackson from Duke, and then all South Carolina after that. Chloe Kitts, Sanaya Fagan, and MiLaysia Fulwiley. And Chloe Kitts taking home MVP honors. Very good weekend for the Gamecocks. As I said before, I know it's not ideal to see this team playing such close games like they have been, but at the end of the day, wins are wins, right? You can obviously be frustrated by the fact that, okay, like they haven't played their best, but at the same time, they've done enough to get the job done. And I think this also goes back to the fact of, like, talked about it so much before, this team schedules harder than anyone in the country. At least they tried to, because not every team wants to go out there and face the Dawn Staley squad. But give them credit. Throughout the year, they make the trip to Los Angeles. They play Duke. They made the Tobacco Road trip last year, obviously, too. They've had a lot of tough battles, playing UConn every single year, it feels like. Playing Texas twice this year. LSU. I mean, is there any team in the country that's more battle-tested than South Carolina with women's basketball? Me, personally, I don't think so. And just look at the amount of tight games they've had. They've won a few squeakers, but at the end of the day, they're moving on to the Final Four. And they'll wait to see who the winner of Texas and TCU is. That game will tip off tomorrow night, 7 p.m. in the Elite Eight. For a chance, and we'll see if it happens. It does feel like it, potentially seeing a fourth bout this season between the Longhorns and Gamecocks. And if not, it'd be TCU, and South Carolina went to Fort Worth much earlier this season and won that game. But it would definitely be interesting to see how the Horned Frogs, Jeremiah Donati's old school as AD, stacks up against this Gamecock squad for the second time this year. Now that it's been a long time since they've faced them. And I do think South Carolina definitely has a chance to repeat here, obviously, now that they're going to the Final Four in Tampa. And they would either be playing in the national championship, either UCLA or UConn potentially. And that would be a challenge in and of itself. I think that would be obviously the harder test compared to Texas TCU. But again, all those games would be very tough, and it's not going to be easy. These last 3 games have certainly not been that case, but moving on, and That's the most important thing, I would say. And Big Red's got a question. Did Dawn Staley make women's basketball change to compete with her lockdown teams? Change in what way? Like making adjustments in game? Of course. Like that's always what teams do, especially in a tight-knit game that you're trailing, and you have to make adjustments. That's something that is so crucial in sports in general, because if you're not making adjustments, especially at halftime, in between periods, you're going to end up, falling flat on your face. But this team, they know how to make adjustments on the fly, it seems like, and it's enough to win games. It has not been pretty, for sure. Has not always been pretty. But like I said before, does it really matter when they keep winning at the end of the day? Like if they win the national championship again this year, is anyone really going to be, complaining about the fact that, they only won by 5 points? Like, they struggled in this game, but hey, they won. Like, doesn't matter at the end of the day. I know it's tough to please people, but if you win games, it's the only stat that really, really matters. Again, shooting percentage, how the defense did, all that obviously in game matters. But when you're moving on to the next round, it's survive and advance for a reason, right? It's March Madness at its finest. Really big win for the Gamecocks today. And it's been a great weekend in general for the ladies in all sports. Equestrian winning the SEC championship. It's been fantastic to see. And it really goes to show that, women, they can definitely compete at the highest level and do very, very good things. And at South Carolina, it's good to see that women can accomplish so much. Now, let's turn our attention to a much more sore subject, I would say. I'm going to keep the show short today, short and sweet and to the point. Baseball. Oof. It's been rough. I'm not going to lie. Having to be at all 3 games this weekend. I was at Arkansas last week. I was in Charlotte for the midweek game against North Carolina. And then watching 27 innings of baseball this weekend. I feel like it's taken years off my life. Just watching some of the ways teams lose games. And South Carolina is definitely subject to that. It was a really rough weekend for the Gamecocks as they got swept by Tennessee. They've now lost 7 games in a row, and I've got a lot to say about this team, a lot that thoughts about everything that's going on. And again, I'm not going to break these games down little by little. I'm going to just give an overall general synopsis of what happened this weekend. Friday, lose 11-7 in a game where truly, I think if you don't make one mistake, you're potentially, I don't know if you win the game, but it looks a lot better than what ended up happening, because in the second inning, after seemingly what looked like was hit straight to Jordan Carrion as a double play ball that he should have fielded cleanly and gets a double play to get Jake McCoy a potential scoreless inning after giving up a run in the first. Carrion boots it. Everyone's safe. Tennessee goes on to score 5 runs in the second inning, and that really put a damper on McCoy's outing. You look at the numbers, you might think that he didn't really have a good day. I can agree to some extent, but also I disagree, because 8 of the runs given up, only 3 were earned over the 4 innings he pitched. Again, he was not perfect. Let's not make any mistake about that. He gave up 2 home runs, but all 5 of those runs in the second inning were unearned. And if it's not for that one error by Carrion, again, he had a great day at the plate because he went 4 for 4 in the game. But if he doesn't make that error, given the fact that the bullpen pitched pretty well, all things considered, like if there's a few moments in this game where if things go differently in this situation, South Carolina might win. Like when Tyler Pitzer came in, he gave up a 0-2 line drive to the opposite field that literally, if KJ Scobie, and again, it's not his fault, but like if he's able to get a glove on this line drive hit by a left-handed hitter, Jay Abernathy, if he gets a glove on it, knocks it down, keeps it in the infield, or heck, makes a catch, you're out of the inning in the 5th. and you limit Tennessee's damage, but instead you fall behind by 8 runs and you're having to play catch up the rest of the way. You get 2 runs in the 6th, 2 more in the 9th, and it was a good effort. I mean, 7 runs, 13 hits, but again, I fear that the one mistake really made was the error, and that really did cost South Carolina tremendously in this game. Now, moving on to Saturday, I thought this was South Carolina's best game of the weekend by far. If there was any game they should have won, I think it was this one. Let's fast forward to the late innings. South Carolina fought back from falling behind 3-0, took the lead going into the 7th inning, and then even going into the top of the 8th with a 4-3 lead. Brandon Stone had just pitched a scoreless 7th inning. Again, his first outing back in the bullpen after starting the last 2 weekends. Gives up a pair of 2-run homers, one in the 8th to give Tennessee the lead. South Carolina ties the game at 5 in the 8th on a Bo Hollins RBI single. And then in the 9th, another 2-run homer given up. It's just, what more can you say? It's another thing where 2 mistakes were made by Stone, and it proved costly. The bullpen faltered for what feels like not like the latest saga here, because the bullpen has not been great lately. Defense cost you in 1 inning on Friday, and the bullpen with Stone giving up 2 home runs when he's usually been very, very sharp. Let's also give some credit to Tennessee. Tennessee's a very good offense. A lot of good hitters in that lineup. But, I mean, you make one mistake to these guys, and it's the difference between winning and losing. As Andrew Fisher and Cannon Peebles both took Stone deep in the late innings, and that was the difference. You fast forward to Sunday now, earlier today, out at Founders Park. South Carolina grabs an early 1-0 lead in the 1st inning. Matthew Becker pitching excellent on the mound. Retires Tennessee's lineup one time through. 3 perfect innings, no hits, no walks or runs given up. And then the 4th inning starts to implode a little bit. He hits the leadoff batter on the first pitch, then gives up 3 runs, and he only managed to record 2 outs. And it looked like he was going to get out of the inning with 2 strikeouts, and then after giving up 2 runs, and then he gives up another hit, and that subsequently ended his day. And it's not ideal. You had to play catch up again, but this time, unlike Saturday, you just didn't get much from your offense today. You had 10 hits, but it didn't matter because of the fact that you scored 2 runs only and you left 11 runners on base. So the moral of Sunday's story was that you didn't pitch bad. I mean, outside of a few mistakes here and there, your pitching did not kill you in this game. It wasn't great by any means. Let's also point that out. I'm not saying this pitching staff was great today. I mean, Caleb Jones, who pitched excellent on Friday, gave up 2 home runs in 1 inning of relief. Parker Marlott gave up 2 runs. Becker, as I mentioned before, gave up a few runs. Was not great from the pitching staff. Your defense was fine today. But today, more than anything, every starter in this lineup had a hit today, at least 1 hit. Kennedy Jones was the only guy with a multi-hit game today. But a lot of your hits, heck, 9 of them were for singles. You know, the rest, 1 of them was only for an extra base hit. So when you can only get 1 double in this game, no home runs, no triples, and you see Tennessee hitting the way they are, mashing the ball all over the yard today, it's tough to win a game like that. And you're never going to be able to beat a team like Tennessee when you only score 2 runs. That's just it's just not going to cut it. And it's sad that it's getting to the point where people are just like, you see this comment here, like, people are expecting South Carolina to get swept. I mean, what has happened to this program? I think quite simply, that has to be the question. And you're 1-8 in conference play right now. And we'll get into the big picture here in a second. I have audio I want to play from Paul Maneri earlier today here in a sec. But I mean, it's been rough, and I don't know. And so here's a question from Big Red. We have a lot of comments here from people about baseball, and we'll get into as many as I can tonight. The question is the problem with baseball the newness of the coach or something bigger? I do think, honestly, it's more so like, look at what Maneri has to work with. He's never going to say it publicly on record, but like, you look at what he's got to work with. It's not ideal. It's a baseball team that most of this roster, yes, there are a lot of transfers, but most of the key guys that are playing right now are comprised of past Mark Kingston teams. And we know how that tenure went to a really rough end last year. You had guys that outside of Ethan Petrie, Nathan Hall's been pretty good. You just don't have enough, I don't think. And when you consistently see this team, they're not a power threat by any means. Look at Tennessee. Tennessee hits the ball everywhere. They hit so many home runs this weekend. 2 more today. But it's the inability, I feel like we say this a lot now, where South Carolina, they seemingly don't have many extra base hits on their score sheet. It's a lot of singles, a lot of double play balls. They hit into 3 double plays today. I mean, you're not going to win a game only hitting singles and scoring 2 runs. It's just not going to happen. And I think it's just part of the process of, hey, this is what Maneri has to work with, and it's year 1. Did we really expect? I don't think anyone in their right mind. If you did, that's okay. It's not a big deal. I don't think a lot of people thought this team was going to Omaha in year 1, right? Maneri did say, it's basically Omaha or bust. He's got a 1-year plan. That's all good to say in your introductory press conference. You win the press conference. You win the fan base over. Heck, you won me over thinking that way because I'm like, all right, this is the right hire. And I'm not blaming him necessarily, but it is just a catastrophic mess right now. And I think it's a lot worse than people thought. Then again, much like softball, except softball is doing very well right now, the SEC is very, very tough. And you look at teams across the league that South Carolina is going to be playing starting here in April. Texas A&M's been awful. Florida's been terrible. Missouri's not really surprised, but Missouri's been terrible. Mississippi State. People want Chris Lemonis fired so badly out in Starkville that it's probably going to happen, honestly, just with the way things are going for the Bulldogs. So South Carolina, while it has not been good, they're certainly not the only team underperforming. And look at the situation here. It's year 1 with a new coach. Like, you gotta give it time. That's the main thing here. You gotta give it time to be able to see what can happen. Like, I keep comparing it to men's basketball. When Lamont Paris in South Carolina won 4 SEC games in his first year and only won 11 games, I'm sure people, I can't remember, but I'm sure people hit the panic button like crazy saying this was a terrible hire and it was a wrong move. These players are not good, all this and that. And you look back at the next season, they have a remarkable year. Heck, probably the best in program history besides the Final Four year, and they were fantastic. And then obviously this year, they kind of fall flat on their face. It happens. Even with football, Shane Beamer, South Carolina, definitely exceeded expectations in year 1. Had a great year 2. Only won 5 games in 2023. People are calling for his job. That's the business. That's life. And I think with baseball right now, what we're seeing is people are frustrated. People are obviously sickened by what happened last year. And you think just because Mark Kingston was fired and Paul Maneri, who's won everywhere he's been, is coming in to save the day, that it's going to be perfect and everything's going to be okay. I hate to say that's just not reality. It's not as simple as snap your fingers, bring a new coach in, a few new players, new coaching staff, and everything's going to be solved right away. It's tough. We're at the halfway point in the season now for the regular season, that is. A lot of time is still left in the season. I know people do not want to hear that from me, but, again, optimistically speaking here, it is going to be very hard to climb out of a 1-8 hole. I don't even know if they will. But what I am saying is there is a lot of time left in this year, and Maneri's mentioned it before, whether you believe him or not, it's up to you. His teams play better as the year goes on. So will that be the case this year? You hope so, because otherwise it's going to be a year where you miss the postseason, but you still got a month and a half left to go in this regular season, and then SEC tournament, and then you sneak into the NCAA tournament, maybe as a 3 seed, maybe, I doubt a 2 seed, but maybe a 3 seed or something. You get hot, it's baseball. You never know what can happen. And again, like I said before, it's just the cards that have been dealt for this baseball program right now. It was never going to be easy necessarily to get out of the hole that they were in. And I think next year, Maneri briefly mentioned it earlier this weekend. I think we're going to see a lot of improvements in terms of recruiting. And Kevin brings up a question here. What is the NIL situation with baseball? Also, will revenue sharing help, but also getting more scholarships for baseball help? You think, yes, getting more scholarships will definitely help. Moving up to, I believe it's 34 scholarships now going into next season is going to be huge because, number one, you're not going to have as many walk-ons on the team, obviously. And you're going to be able to give guys a full ride. That's awesome. That's great. And I think that's really big in terms of, hey, when you're in the transfer portal this summer, you have a scholarship spot open for a guy. Whereas maybe in years past, it was, we don't have a scholarship open for you, but we have a spot on the team open. It's a lot easier, I think, to sell the fact that, hey, got a scholarship open. And yes, the revenue sharing will help. It's going to help. It's obviously helping in men's basketball right now, bringing in a few key guys earlier today. But getting more guys on scholarship is going to be huge. And I just think, this is obviously a school that has a very proud history as a baseball program. It's just, it's tough seeing what's happening right now. I will judge the season by how it goes by the end of it, not just by this many games at the halfway point, because again, there's still so much season left to go. And you also have to consider the fact that this program has had to, endure a lot of change in this past year. And even right now, playing two of the top teams in the country in back-to-back weekends. You go to Arkansas, you get swept by the number 2 team in the country. You can argue they'd be number 1 if it weren't for number 1 Tennessee, who comes into Columbia and sweeps South Carolina for the first time in Columbia since 1997. So it's just, we have to also think about the fact that this program right now is it's in rebuild mode necessarily. To some extent, I think you could say that. But they're just not on the same level right now as the top teams in this SEC conference. And they weren't last year either. They haven't really been for the last few years. And you can call it a bad hire or whatever, but it's just, and pass blame around because, it's what happens. But there's just a lot going on right now that's not going right. And I mentioned earlier the offense. Here's what Paul Maneri had to say about the offense at the plate today. And he did mention two interesting things today. Number one, the fact that he noticed that there was something different just about the way the team played today. And he mentioned the fact that there was a lot of fight, a lot of scratching and clawing to try to get the wins in games 1 and 2 this weekend. And then today didn't really feel that way. And I asked him kind of point blank, at what point did you kind of feel that ended up being the case today? Was it something where Tennessee takes the lead and you notice like a sense of a mood shift in the dugout? He declined that part. He didn't say that he said there was no mood shift at all in the dugout or anything like that. That wasn't the issue. But it really was the offense not being able to get the job done, which is a fair point. So here's what he had to say about all that.
I just described the bases loaded, nobody out situation. And you got your 3 and 4 hole hitters coming up. I mean, those guys are supposed to drive in the runs for you, and they didn't. And before that inning, we had other situations. I don't remember. I'd have to go back and look at the play-by-play, but we had other situations as well. Maybe not to that extreme, bases loaded, nobody out. We just couldn't. Nobody could come up and hit the ball hard. And good big. I think one situation, Carry-On was up with a runner on third, and his instruction is to, the infield's back in the middle of the field. I believe in I have a saying that I use that Branch Rickey used in the 20s. Luck is the residue of design. So Carrion comes up, hits the ball pretty good, but right at the third baseman, so we can't score the run. He's the only infielder that's playing in. But what should he be trying to do there? He should be trying to hit a ground ball in the middle of the infield where the infielders are back. And then you don't have bad luck. The guy scores from third, and we pick up a big run there. And so we left a run off the board there. We left runners off the board later on when, as I mentioned, Jace should try to hit that off-speed pitch to the opposite field, hit a fly ball. So, those add up over the course of the game. And it's nothing different about the mood in the dugout or whatever. I told the guys, I said, hey, we had 10 hits. Every single guy in the lineup had a hit. We only struck out 5 times, and we didn't have any horrible pitching performances, Just didn't play well enough to win because we didn't hit in the clutch. We left 11 runners on base. And some days, it's hard to explain why it happens. Other days you come through. Some days you don't. It's been the proverbial question forever, why does that happen in this sport? But today wasn't our day. We didn't.
So, again, that is what Pulmonary had to say just about the fact of, as I mentioned before, that South Carolina just didn't have a good day offensively. And you can look at the fact of the team was down, maybe it went, down in the dumps when they fell behind, whatever, but at the end of the day, you didn't hit in key situations. And one situation I forgot to mention that really did I think this was the turning point in the game. When you're down by a few runs, I think you're down 5-1 at the time in the 5th inning. You get the bases loaded, nobody out. I mentioned this today in Leaving the Yard on my recap video. But you should be able to score at least 1 run. 1 run should be a guarantee. 2 should be a requirement when you have the bases loaded and nobody out. But South Carolina, in a game where they just could not hit well at all with key situations, they had no trouble getting guys on base. They just weren't able to get them in. That's the problem. Outside of 2 innings where you were able to do so, that was it. And a Jace Boyd a strikeout, and then a Kennedy Jones, what felt like in the press box, I'm just thinking in my head, he's going to ground to a double play right here, isn't he? And he ends up grounding out to short, double play, inning over, no runs. That's how you lose a baseball game right there. When you don't score with the bases loaded, nobody out, Tennessee just brought in a new pitcher, the pressure's on them to get these outs here, and they came through. And that's what makes them a championship-winning baseball program that they already are. And then coming to this weekend, they sweep South Carolina. It's very impressive what they did this weekend. So let's not forget that part of it. But, and EXL brings up a good question here. Last year's team actually came back multiple times after losses and stepped up. This year, I'm not sure we even see that. It's a really defeated atmosphere and has been for a while. It doesn't help that, and I'll give South Carolina some credit here, although there's a little bit of an asterisk next to it. Friday and Saturday, packed out. Very good crowds this weekend. Besides, Sunday's a little bit more acceptable because, number one, South Carolina's about to get swept by number 1 Tennessee, and the game got moved from 5 p.m. to 12. So it's hard to show up for a noon game when you got the church crowd coming out and stuff around, 11, and, you got people, enjoying their Sunday. There's a lot of reason why I think the crowd wasn't very packed today at all. And honestly, Tennessee fans, as I kind of expected, Tennessee fans showed up very well this weekend. And there was a lot of orange in the crowd this weekend. But I will say the first 2 games, crowd was into it really great. And I think the players fed off of that for sure, especially on Saturday before blowing the lead. But it's just, it does look a little defeated out there. Again, I think the fans are kind of just tired of it. Number one, after seeing how last year went with everyone wanting to see Kingston fired, eventually they got their way. And then this year, it hasn't worked out to where it's hey, they're not beating everyone. I don't know how realistic that ever was. But to get to an 8 or 1-8 start in conference play, I don't know if that was on many people's bingo cards, and certainly not mine to some extent. I did think last week, I mean, making predictions for the Arkansas series, I thought South Carolina would win at least one game. Definitely one game at most. And then this weekend, I figured they might get swept, but I was like, all right, they could win a game this weekend. They've shown that, all right, they can score a little bit more on offense, and they definitely should have won Saturday's game, I thought. Again, it's just you make a mistake to this Tennessee team, you leave a pitch over the middle, you make an error in the infield, you don't hit with runners in scoring position consistently, you're going to lose baseball games. And that's what we saw this weekend. Now, all that to be said, the month of March was really, really bad. 8-11 this month. I think you started out 8-3, if I'm not mistaken. And then obviously you drop your final seven games of the month to finish 8-11. It's really, really bad. You're off to your worst start in conference play since 1992. But now this month, you're turning the page to April. No one was more happy about that than Minari. April 1st, you play Presbyterian. We'll dive back into that in a second here. There's another interesting quote from Minari on that. That's caused a lot of people to get in a little bit of an uproar on social media. But this month, I think the schedule is a lot more manageable. Now, South Carolina hasn't really shown you that they can win, maybe outside the Oklahoma series, but the schedule does bode well to where it's like, all right, you have a good month here. You're right back in it, I think, in terms of like bubble making the postseason. Your SEC weekend series consists of, and I'm going by conference record on this, you're at 1-8 Mississippi State this upcoming weekend. Then you're at 1-8 Texas A&M the weekend after that. You're home versus Ole Miss the weekend of the spring football game. They're 6-3 in conference play. And then you're at Kentucky, who's 4-5 in conference play. And coincidentally, they're coming off a series win right now over A&M. Those first two weekend series in particular this upcoming month in April. Mississippi State, as I mentioned earlier, not that it's official or anything. At some point, though, I think the Chris Lemonis era in Starkville is probably on its way out relatively soon. And then A&M they've been awful this year. I mean, losing a series to Kentucky is, you look back at last year, Kentucky was great last season. Made it to the College World Series, made it to Omaha, had a great year, lost a lot of guys. They've been all right this year. I expected some sort of drop off, just judging by the preseason rankings and stuff. And then you see that A&M has been just awful this year. I mean, they got swept by Alabama, got swept last weekend too, and then they lose a series this weekend. I don't know if Michael Early is on the hot seat necessarily. Probably is, judging just by A&M fans not being happy with what's going on. But these are two series, these next two weekends, that if you lose these series, your season's over. No doubt in my mind that if it's not already, then your season's definitely fried after 2 weeks from now. If you drop both of these series coming up, you have a very golden opportunity here to, if you can go into Starkville, go into A&M, two teams that are just down on their luck right now, ready to move on from whatever is going on right now. People are going to be ready for Lemonis to be gone. And then at A&M, it's just been really, really rough. And it's going to be interesting to see, because EXO brings up a great point. We will see who the worst of the bad teams is. And then South Carolina plays Florida in May. But this is really going to be where we learn what this South Carolina team is really, really about. The Arkansas-Tennessee series, they weren't up to the challenge. But those are also two of the best teams in the country. South Carolina is not on that level yet. These are teams that I think are much more on their playing field. You have to go on the road. It's never easy to win on the road in the SEC. But I do believe, for as bad as this stretch has been, you have to be able to win these series. You have to be able to. You want any chance of getting to the postseason, you win these series, you're still hypothetically alive, I would say, very much so. And it wouldn't even take finishing 500 in the conference to get to the tournament. We saw South Carolina last year as a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament, in the Raleigh Regional. They won 13 conference games. So I do think if you lose these next two series, I think we can officially say this season is pretty much in the books. And if you do win the series, you got Ole Miss at home. You never know. Never know. Things could be different by then, and then you go to Kentucky. So there is a lot of opportunity to flip the script here this upcoming month. But it does all start with Presbyterian on Tuesday night. And this was probably the most interesting comment, final point I'm going to make before wrapping up the show here, that Mainieri did have to say on the mindset for the Presbyterian game, which has caused a lot of people to feel a lot of different ways about it.
When we strap it up against Presbyterian on Tuesday, we need to win a baseball game. I hate losing more than anybody, believe me, and it's a very distasteful thing. I don't care if you're playing the Yankees 7 times in a row. Just to lose 7 games in a row is very, it's very discouraging when that happens. Disappointing, not discouraging, disappointing. But the important thing for us is not to get discouraged and go out there on Tuesday and play as well as we can play. We're gonna treat Tuesday like it's the 7th game of the World Series. Whatever it takes to win we need to win a baseball game. Whatever it takes, we're not holding anything back, and we're gonna go out there and play as hard and as well as we possibly can to attempt to win a game. And then after that, we'll turn the page and go to Starkville, and hopefully we'll compete hard there and have some success. We'll see. It's not an easy place to go, despite what their record is. But it's also a little different than having to play these last 2 teams. These 2 teams are well put together, and they play well on the field. So, not that anything's going to be easy, but.
So that's what Paul Mainieri had to say about the upcoming Presbyterian game, which the main point from that is that South Carolina, at least according to Mainieri, was going to be treating it like Game 7 of the World Series. And I will say this. I don't have an issue with that being the mentality. That is the mentality you should always have in baseball, especially. Like, you are playing to win the game. You are not playing to lose. So obviously, treat it like a World Series. Understandable. The problem with it, and I think this is where people get a little bit annoyed, is that you say that right after getting swept for the 2nd weekend in a row. Because then that makes it sound like, okay, so did you not treat the Arkansas, the Tennessee series, heck, the Clemson series like the World Series? Did you not treat it like that then? Not saying they didn't or did. That's not my place to say, but I'm just pointing out the fact that this came at a kind of bad time to say that, in my opinion. So, again, no problem that he said it in the fact of like, okay, they're treating Tuesday like the World Series. That's fine. But it's the fact that it was said right after getting swept. And that's where I think people probably have the issue. So, South Carolina really, really needs a win. Probably more so than, obviously A&M and Mississippi State just got swept by LSU. So, those teams need a win really badly. I know Florida's really bad as well right now in the SEC, though they have won a game against Ole Miss. But South Carolina needs a win more than anything on Tuesday. I know it's not going to change anyone's mind about anything that's happened with this team, but a win can really help out going into a series against Mississippi State, a team that I do feel like is very much on the ropes of, hey, if they lose a series to South Carolina this weekend at home, I don't know. Things could probably happen, but I don't know what really is the situation out there in Starkville, other than just seeing people say, hey, I want Chris Lemonis fired, all this yada yada stuff. So the Gamecocks back in action Tuesday night, 7 p.m. on SEC Network. We'll have all coverage and updates for you on Gamecock Central. And then this weekend, I'll be traveling to Starkville, heading out to Mississippi State for the weekend series, which starts on Friday night out there at Duty Noble. First time out there. I'm really looking forward to going out there, regardless of what happens on the baseball field. So, appreciate you guys all tuning in. We've covered a lot of territory in this live stream, talking softball, basketball, baseball, Really good show, very productive, talking about a lot of different things, and glad I was able to do it with you guys on a late night as it's getting close to 9:30 now. So once again, appreciate you guys tuning in. As always, subscribe to GamecockCentral.com. If you're watching on YouTube right now, as soon as the stream ends, hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the stream. Like and subscribe, as they say. And if you're on any other platform, give it a thumbs up as well if you're enjoying what you're hearing. And I will see you guys next week on Sunday Reset. We'll be broadcasting live from Starkville, and we will be breaking down the baseball series, whether it's before or after game 3. We'll see. Most likely before. Trying to get these times nailed down, but again, the schedule has been very just all over the place lately, and definitely we'll get it figured out here soon enough. But appreciate you guys tuning in as always. Have a great rest of your night, and I will see you guys again next Sunday for our next edition of GC Live Sunday Reset. Until then, take care, everyone, and I'll see you then.